I'm going to say something we all already know. Old saying, Lord knows I didn't invent it. If something's too good to be true, it's because it is. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to be the one that's being taken for a ride? I know I'm not alone. I listen to psychologists and commentators on the old intrawebs, and I'm sure we all do. And what's out there in the stream, there have been podcasts on the topic of dopamine. And we all should know by now that your psyche seeks dopamine, right? It's the brain's built-in own reward drug. And systems of behavior, as well as things in our environment, can hijack that mechanism in your brain. Variable impulse reward. So your brain is always looking for the next hit, right? And your brain's so tricky, you get a dopamine hit, they have discovered, from what I understand, my layman's understanding of listening to these folks, from even talking about your plans or deeply thinking about something you want to do. You can get a dopamine hit from that, from having a dream, from thinking about a dream, from talking about a dream. And it seems business models have arisen to take advantage of this under the veneer and the cloak of trading. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about proprietary trading firms. Just a brief history. And I want to go over this because this topic has become somewhat complicated and it's changed over the years. Open prop, or open proprietary trading. Open prop, the way I think about open prop, it used to be a thing, right? You could work at a firm, and this I'm speaking in the past. You could work at a firm, an open proprietary trading firm, take your skills as a trader, assuming that you had them, trade the capital of the firm, and then you get a cut of the profits, right? You don't make any profits, then, there's no cut. You had to prove you had the skill. Now, the open prop firm was taking a lot of risk on the trader, taking a lot of risk. They had to assume that the trader, first of all, even had the skill, and B, they wouldn't do something stupid. That's the major risk right there. I mean, if you blow up, you're blowing up someone else's money, not your money. And God forbid you have an outsize event and get upside down, because then the firm's on the hook for it, right? And they had ways to mitigate this risk. One of the ways is they'd get many different traders doing many different things. That's why you'll hear me and other guys say, the last thing you want on a desk is everybody with the same trade idea doing the same thing. They even had a show about that one time where they were trying to train traders. And these newbies were like all doing the same thing, which on a risk desk is like a nightmare, right? So you want different traders doing different things, non-correlated positions and theses, and if they all have positive expectancy, right? That's sort of how GTC, that's sort of what our whole thing is multi-strat, non-correlative thesis, right? But regardless, they're still on the hook. If somebody does something stupid, and God forbid, like I said, they get upside down on it, because then the firm's on the hook for it, not the trader, right? And then you would have closed private prop. Several partners closed to the public, trade their own capital, right? And there's regulations around all of the above. Is the firm to be considered a security? What are the exemptions for that? There's all sorts of things you have to know about and sort of be clean on from a regulatory standpoint. Now, closed private prop is still a thing, very much a thing, and there are still regulations about it that you have to adhere to. Again, closed private prop, several partners closed off to the public. They won't talk about their firm. They don't advertise their firm. You can't find it. There's no website. These are all regulations. They have to, they can't post results. These are all regulations around closed private prop, and that is still legitimate, and many folks, thousands of us, I'm one of them, do that. What about open prop? Well, let's go back to what we said open prop was. Invariably and inevitably, due to just probability and statistics, prop firms would run into problems, open prop firms. They'd experience a trader going rogue or a risk desk that just wasn't keeping track of its traders and keeping an eye on things, and someone would blow out. And again, that's the risk to the open prop firm, right? So how do you mitigate that risk? Well, non-correlative returns, right? Non-correlative revenue and theses and strategies. So to supplement the revenue stream, the deviation began. The standardization of deviations began, and in my personal opinion, in my belief, so began the death of open prop. They started selling educational materials. Now, I'm not bagging on education materials or selling educational materials if it has some worth. Something that GTC Traders plans to do in the future. I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. There should be some recompense. The real question is there any value in it? Is there true value in it? Or is it some silly, like, we've got the AI trading bot, red light, green light, red arrow, green arrow signals. It's an indicator. All that nonsense, right? So, but if it has worth, hey, I'm not bagging on educational materials, and that's how some of these firms would supplement their revenue streams. And okay, we've got that building up in the background, and we can do different things with that revenue and sort of mitigate our risk, right? But as Dave Chappelle likes to say, I don't like to get between another man and his paper, right? I will qualify Dave Chappelle's statement. I don't like to get between another man and his legitimate paper. Let's just talk here for a second about what's happened to open prop. They started selling educational materials. Like I said, no harm, no foul there if it's got value. They found out that could be quite lucrative. And that's descended over time because traders kept blowing up and, the firm was on the hook for it. What if we could negate the entire risk of traders blowing up on our desks? Well, you have them selling these educational materials, right? And as we said, they found out that was quite lucrative, and that has descended over time to open prop that was legitimate, I feel, being dead. So let's circle back here for a second to the topic of dopamine hits and dreams, right? And many have the dream of being a trader, right? They talk about it. They think deeply about it. I want to be a trader. Well, even that's now deviated incredibly. I mean, just talk about a case study in the logic of failure. Good book, by the way. And the standardization of deviations. So your psyche, as we were saying, it gets this beautiful dopamine hit with each win, right? Or if you get a win, and sometimes the win's simply considering a path or talking about a dream, you get that dopamine hit. So these firms figured out how to arbitrage money out of that. And that's why I refer to what people are calling open prop now. I call it fee arbitrage on the dream of being a trader. So here's basically how it works. They sell you the educational materials, right? Let's say $300 to $700 a pop, right? I don't know because I haven't done any price point checks or anything like that because I just don't like the business model. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's $300 to $700. Now, you buy that, boom, the firm has made that money. Now, let's talk about tests because they hold out the carrot that if you're good, you can be a funded trader, that you can be a funded trader after taking some evaluations. And if you pass these evaluations, you could have $250,000 or $500,000 to begin. And then, oh, wow, and they're basically standing on the shoulders of open prop in the past saying, hey, you know what? You'll be a funded trader. And just like what ones used to know of open prop, you'll be given $500,000 and you will get a share of the profits, the trading profits, and they tell you what the share is going to be and all of that stuff. So I have heard that some of these folks, you have to pay to take an evaluation to see if you have the skill to trade their money. So let's just say you pay another $250 to take some test, and you pass their standards, and you might might be able to graduate onto being a funded trader. The dream, right? Well, they've already sucked some fees out of you. So you're on your way to graduate to being a funded trader. You've gone through and paid for the educational materials and maybe paying for some test. And you're about to graduate to being a funded trader. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, what standards do you have to prove that you meet? Let's talk about that. The standards. What sort of trading performance that you have to show that you have. Now, in our Twitter stream, or GTC Twitter stream, I should say, I have pinned a tweet. And here it is. And if you read it, it's right at the top, and we've pinned it. If it's one thing I think new short-term traders should focus in on, and you will not hear this from the combine, scammy, furu, let's talk motivation trading educator types, and I got this idea from my man, Discovery Trader, Discovery Trading Group. Study the performance grids of auditable firms. In other words, real firms that are out there trading real capital that are in databases like this one, and see what realistic performance is. And not just realistic, but like world-class performance. Okay? These are third-party auditable performance value-added monthly index and grids of myriads of short-term trading firms. Learn about their mandate and objective, what they're attempting to do to fulfill that mandate, what's their thesis. Learn the metrics. Study the metrics. I've said that over and over again. Study them. Start there. Not at some furu technical tea leaf reading entrances, the supposed all nonsense. These firms are handling hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And you'll get a handle on mandates and objectives and what's reasonable, what's considered good, what's not good, right? And I've posted these images. There is a reason why I have said, and when I say study them, I mean study them. Understand realistic performance. People are lining up and paying to take these sim tests and educational materials so freaking high, it's completely unrealistic, it's not obtainable, and it's laughable. So my analogy is this. You know, it's almost as if somebody comes along and says, hey, you want to get a stake to play poker? We'll stake you like $500,000. And you can go out and play poker and, you get, X percentage of the profits and we're going to stake you, all right? But before we do that, you have to pay to be trained by someone else. And let's say it's it's one of the greats, like Phil Ivey, right? So for $1,000, you pay us $1,000, you sit at the table, you play with Phil Ivey, and he tutors you to play poker. Hey, if it's Phil Ivey, I'm going to pay the $1,000 to sit at the table and, be tutored by Phil Ivey. Come on, give me a break. That's a deal, right? Pretty awesome. Now, they obviously don't have a name that's as big as Phil Ivey's, but they always have some supposed great trader, right? Nothing like Phil Ivey's standings, but we have a guy, right? We have a guy who's supposedly so great. Now, you pay the $1,000, which they now have, and you've been let's just say you've been trained by Phil Ivey. Great. But that's not enough. If we're going to stake you, a bankroll of, say, $500,000, then you need to play a test. And we need to see how good you are. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to play against Phil Ivey. First of all, good luck with all that. And here's the standard. If you can pull a royal flush against Phil twice, congratulations, we'll stake you. It's never going to happen, right? And you might get close. It's like, It's like, and you have that anticipation, right? You have that anticipation. Oh, here it comes. Oh my God. I'm going to get it. Oh. And it's like, and now you're thinking about the Lamborghinis, which not really great machine. I just don't like the people that buy them. You're thinking about the Lamborghinis and you're thinking about all the cars and all the wonderful things and wah. It's never going to happen. Heck, you're never going to beat Phil Ivey. It's just that's never going to happen. But on ridiculous hands? But let's just say you beat Phil on one hand. Oh, well, now we have a special advanced class. So we only offer this to people that have shown the skill that you have, right? So you will get this advanced special materials for $750. Now this time, if you beat him with a full house on 4 hands, we'll stake you, well, it's not as good as beating him with a, the straight flush, but hey, we'll stake you $250,000, pay us $750. You get to sit down with Phil Ivey again for a little more tutelage. Oh, heck, I'm probably going to pay the $750 if it's with Phil, but we've got this other special trader and there's some name behind it, and round you go. All right, round and round you go, because now the standards aren't quite as high. It's just a full house, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is going to be fantastic. And the dreams begin again, and you're already getting the dopamine hit, and you're betting large, and they've already got that stack, and wah. And round and round and round you go. Now, the only way, let's say sometimes, let's just take this analogy aside. I have seen standards on these tests, and actually read these I have read, that are so outrageous, so ridiculous. As we said before, they're completely unrealistic. Nobody in the world handling billions of dollars. That's why I said study those metrics. Study those databases. Nobody is doing this. But, I've seen requirements of well, if you do 10% per month in sim, you have to have multiple trades per day. You can only have 1% drawdowns. Stuff no one in the world does. No one. But the math says, let's just take these ridiculous, straight flush or a full house twice against Phil Ivey. Let's just leave that out of it, right? But I've seen these ridiculous requirements that mathematically you might be able to pull off once or twice. But you're going to have to bet too big on your bankroll. You're just going to have to bet way, way too large. If you're trying for 10% per month or something, or 10% a week, 1% drawdown stuff nobody does, you might be able to pull it off once or twice by betting too big. Or, getting on some lucky streak. If you have bad streaks, the math says you have to have, good, lucky streaks as well. You increase your reward, it's because you increased your risk. End of story. Right? And there's always they'll always have some new requirement, or you didn't quite meet it, or we noticed on this day, and round they go, and they are just fee arbitraging the dream of being a trader out of folks with educational materials, with combines, with evaluations, and in the end you got nothing. And it was all based on stupid metrics that no one can do. Not with any great length of time. I had a tweet on this the other day, a thread actually, that talked about how stop with this nonsense of 10% per month. And I had a really good DM with someone about it, because really large streaks are possible, right? And I'm not saying 10% a month is impossible. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying on a single market, that's always a thing. You can only trade this market, right? They know what they're doing when they set up these requirements. I'm saying on a single market, linear returns, 10% every month, in perpetuity for 5 years on end is impossible. It can't be done. But it can be done in smaller time periods. And I want to highlight this point, okay? I really want to highlight this point. I still haven't gotten around to everything I'm trying to do. I'm running 7 different enterprises here. Be patient with me. I'm sort of a psycho. But every structure I trade under, right, there's a sheet. All traders do that. That's not specific to Dan. And I'm not really good at spreadsheets. I'll just tell you that right now. But in front of every structure I trade under, I don't care what that structure is doing. The very first tab is just the S&P 500 index. Everybody talks about beating the S&P 500 index, right? And it's well, if you do 10% a month, right, then you can beat the S&P 500 index. What's realistic? How much do you need to do? And I said this in that thread. How much do you need to do in order to, quote unquote, beat the S&P 500 index? And I said this in the thread. Do you know how much the S&P 500 index on average, and this is just a bunch of data that we put together and put in every sheet, on average does in a month when you consider all the drawdown and everything else? Right there. Average monthly return, is it 8%? Is it 12%? Wrong. It's 93 freaking basis points. 0.93%. If you could do 0.94% every single month with no drawdown, right? So you're not going to have the big 4.5% or 5% or 8% months, but with no drawdown, congratulations, you're one of the greatest traders on planet Earth, and you are, quote unquote, beating the S&P 500 index, although that's a whole package that I just don't want to even get into right now. It could have its own course on what is beating the S&P 500 index, to a mandate and to a thesis and to what you're attempting to do, right? But regardless, take your 10% a month and stuff it. Right there, the data. 0.93% per month, 0.94%, heck, even 0.93% every single month into perpetuity with no drawdown. That's beating the S&P 500 index because you'd have no drawdown. Like, I don't want to hear your nonsense about 10% every single month in perpetuity. I don't want to hear it. There's been so many ways to fake that. It's just not real. And if ones want to play in fantasy land, let them. Meanwhile, I deal in a little place I like to call planet Earth. Okay? It's not reasonable. But it just sends the folks round and round and round again. Now, here's the thing. It's gotten much worse than all of that. They've figured out a VIG. Get this. When actual traders hear about it, I know MSG Capital ran across this the other day, and he's like, what in the name of God? And when one of my business partners told me about this, he's like, I can hear your mouth just wide open in abject horror as I'm describing this to you. Because I wasn't saying a word. Like, he told me this, and I'm just like, I'm not saying anything. And he's like, through the phone line, I can hear your mouth open in abject horror. They have gotten to the point now where not only are they paying people, like, you got to pay to take some of these sim accounts. They're doing it in sim. And they figured out a VIG to pay out of sim trading profits. So they are paying based on sim accounts, and they've figured out a VIG to make it work. You know what we're talking about? We're talking about slot machines, essentially. See, I don't see how that's not illegal. Maybe the regulators are building a case. When regulators build a case, it usually takes many years. But that's just flat out. I don't see how that's legal. You, in effect, have synthetic derivatives that you're paying on, unregulated, off of sim accounts. All based on that dream of the big payout. So, like a few $100, you can gain access to some account. And if you make it past the arbitrary rules or whatever, somebody else had mentioned this, discretionary payout rules, then you can get paid out on your sim profits. Sim profits. But it's the same thing. And it gets worse. To get paid out of the sim account, what some traders are looking at the math and looking at the VIG. So they're paying multiple shops on sim accounts for payouts on sim. And they're trying to work the numbers across multiple sims. It's absolutely unreal. Here's what I think. Again, this is all just personal thoughts. Let the exchanges catch wind of how much they're missing, because these are people that are not entering the actual realm of real trading, right? This is all taking place in sim. So let the exchanges catch wind of the amount of money they're missing out in data fees. And I wonder how long that's going to last. First of all, I don't see how it's legal to pay out on sim. Second of all, like actual money. We're talking about the fact that there is a synthetic derivative going on based off of exchange data. And then one thing the exchanges are very, very, very particular about, trust you me, is their exchange fees, the fees for getting the data. So let the exchanges get wind that, wow, these folks are no longer entering the realm of actual traders and paying us the fees for the data. Let them catch wind of that. I wonder how long it'll last. Listen, to me, open prop's dead. I don't know. Maybe there still is a legitimate shop out there somewhere. I don't know, because I just don't look into it, right? I've got my own thing. I trade in private prop, but maybe there is. Maybe there is an actual legitimate firm out there. And I do understand what these firms are doing from a risk basis, right? Hey, we can just keep, keep taking just money out of these people's hands, and we have no market risk. And we can sort of act like we're a legitimate trading firm and sort of fee arbitrage the dream of being a trader out of them on educational materials and impossible combines and sim trading payouts. And now you got guys playing multiple sim accounts, like multiple slots or something. It's like, it's unbelievable. But, the firms are thinking, hey, we have no market risk. Well, we are not going to get caught upside down on a trader again. To me, that's the state of open prop. Closed prop, totally different affair. But in my mind, open prop is completely and totally dead from what it once was. And don't be surprised if both the exchanges and the regulators find out about all of this or are already in the process and shut it all down. But, again, all of this, it's just what we think on the matter. Ones will ask us, hey, I see this funded trader thing. What do you guys think about that? What are your thoughts? That's what it is. It's just what we think on the matter. It's just our thoughts, not yours, for whatever the heck date is. As always, stay safe, trade well, and remember that love doesn't cost a dime.